The next mode we're going to look at is keyboard mode. In this mode, the pads become MIDI notes that can be used to play the selected sound, just like a MIDI keyboard. It doesn't matter what the sound is. For instance, it could be the snare here. But now, if I hit keyboard above, the pads play the sample back at different pitches. And it works just like a regular sampler here, whereby higher notes simply speed up playback of the sample, which not only raises the pitch, but makes the sample shorter too, as opposed to lower notes, which make it longer as well as deeper. To show you this with a melodic sample, I'll switch to a second group, Group B, with the B switch, and now I'll open the browser and go for sound this time, so I can load a sample into the first sound slot. And I'll go for a bass sound. So I'll load that in. Now if I press keyboard, you can see the right-hand display shows me the MIDI notes that the pads correspond to. If it's too low or high, I can use the octave buttons to shift the pads up or down an octave, whilst the semitone buttons shift them up or down in semitones, so individual MIDI notes. Now the pitch range is sounding good, I can see from the brighter pad in the corner that I'm starting on F1 on pad 1. And I've got F2 an octave up on pad 13. So essentially the pads are in F. Only they're not assigned to a scale, but rather chromatic mode, meaning they play all of the MIDI notes within that range. And 3 above too. So if I'm happy to keep it in this mode, I can jam out a bass line now, using the sorts of patterns I teach on my Producer's Guide to Theory with Machina course. So focusing on the octaves, as well as 4th, 5th and 7th. I've worked out a simple pattern now, and to record it in, I'm going to turn on fixed velocity, hold down record and create a 2-bar pattern, and then shift and record to lay it down. First up, I think I'll quantize by 50% to tidy the timing a bit. And now, checking out the pattern in Arranger mode, I can edit any individual events just as before, by going into Events, and then using the left and right buttons to choose events, and then the dials on the left display to adjust their values. And as well as shifting their position, length and velocity, which we've seen before, you can also change their pitch. Despite the fact that I'm using all pads in Group B to control my bass line currently, don't forget that there's still only one sound in the group, as you can see in pad mode. So the other 15 sound slots in the group are all currently empty. This means I could choose one of those and then browse for another sound. However, to keep my bass in its own group, I could also leave it as it is and go to the next group, Group C. And then open the browser, and this time I'll go to Instruments and choose NI's Massive plugin, so I can load a massive patch onto the sound slot. Just like when loading Machina's factory sounds, I can choose a type, like synth lead for instance, and then find one I like. One thing you'll notice when you load a melodic sound onto a pad, like a sample or synth preset like this, is the note you play in pad mode might be more important. We saw how to tune a sound differently with Sampler by going to the pitch gate page in plugin mode. But with a synth preset, which should be tuned correctly, instead of adjusting massive settings, I just want to change the MIDI note that's playing it to get the pitch right. This is shown by the bass key on the left display here, and is adjusted in the same way as all the pads in keyboard mode. So I could bring it up from C to F now. And note that this is independent of the range set in keyboard mode. So if I now switch to that mode, my pads still go from F to F as before. Even if I change the bass key in pad mode to something else like G. To make things easier in keyboard mode, you may prefer to choose a scale for the pads rather than have them in chromatic mode, where they play all MIDI notes. For instance, choosing minor as the type means that only notes in the minor scale are assigned. And as we're going from F to F here, now with pads 1 to 8, as we've got rid of a load of notes of course, I can play the F minor scale by going up and down through this pad range. And I can still shift the pads up and down in octaves to make them higher or lower. Or semitones to switch to a different scale, like G minor for instance. So this makes it easy for you to create unique melodic phrases that are in the key of your song, just by hitting random pads. I might try a different lead in the same group now. So I'll select the next pad, and then open the browser, and go for an organ patch in Massive this time. And instead of keeping the pads in regular keyboard mode, so I play a melody in F minor, I'll go for Chords mode, which allows me to play multiple notes at once when I hit a pad. You can see the type of chord on the left here. So at the moment, it's a triad, meaning notes 1, 3 and 5 of the scale. And this just gets transposed up through the notes of the scale, which changes it from a minor to a major chord, depending on what note you play. But always sticking to the notes in F minor. And you can change the chord to 1, 4, 5. Or a minor 7 for a jazzier sound. Or you can choose a chord set, which has different chord progressions across the pads. At the moment, it's a major set, so if we choose a minor one, it'll be more suitable. You can hear the chords flow nicely as you ascend through them, eventually returning back to pad 1. However, in lots of cases, you'll probably just prefer to choose a few pads to create a simpler, alternating pattern. I've got a 4-bar phrase figured out now. So I'll create a new pattern by holding pattern and hitting pad 2, then increase it to 4 bars long, then hit shift and record to play it in. And I'll quantize it by 50%. And if I wanted to make any changes to chords in this pattern, I would probably jump across to the software, as it's an easier way to select whole chords by dragging with the mouse, as you can see, where you can then trim or extend them, or shift them to different positions, or transpose them up or down. And you can see keyboard and pad mode in the software are toggled using the two switches in the corner. So in pad mode now, it's a bit deceiving as it looks like we've got only one note on these steps now. But that's because we've only got a single row to display them, and all notes in each chord are identical in position and length. If I adjust the timing of notes ever so slightly back in keyboard mode, then it's easier to see in pad mode that there are multiple events happening now. So you can see how Machina's pads aren't only good for playing drums and percussion, but also creating different melodic parts too.